Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Tolu Agunbiade, and I'm the founder at Caret. And at Caret, we vet, hire, and manage exceptional non-tech talent for ambitious high-growth companies, typically tech startups. And we do this across the continent of Africa and with amazing partners like Paystack. Um, and I'm joined here today with a very good friend, a former colleague, and now a partner, not in crime, but in business, Emmy. And Emmy, before I jump into our session for today, I would love for you to just introduce yourself to the rest of the audience, and then we'll get going with the rest of the session. Over to you.
Yes, awesome. Thanks, Tolu. Really excited to be here. And to meet virtually as we were in Lagos together a couple of weeks back. I'm Amy Makakalala. I am the Chief of Staff at Paystack. So for those of you who don't know, Paystack helps businesses in Africa to get paid by anyone, anywhere in the world, from startups to market leaders. I don't know, Tolu, if you want me to give the full spectrum of what Paystack does now, or if I should weave this into the conversation.
We'll weave it into the conversation. We just wanted the
Okay,
high
cool.
level about you and then what you do at Paystack. And just to frame the session before we go right in, this session is called Building Your Team to Scale a Venture. And what we're going to just talk about is how companies, especially fast-growing companies like Paystack, find people to recruit on their team, retain them so that they stay on their team, and also manage a culture such that it translates beyond the founders to anybody else joining and is a way to attract more people into the company. And before we jump into specific questions on that, this is where you can share a bit more about, the deep dive on Paystack, but also what it means to be a chief of staff at Paystack.
Okay, two very difficult questions, I guess. But yeah, to give a bit more context around Paystack. So we launched in 2016, and we were the first Nigerian company to get into YC. And at the moment, we have live operations in Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, and we have a Pan-African mission. So this year, we want to accelerate our expansion across African markets. New markets coming in very, very shortly. We were acquired by Stripe in late 2020 to support their mission of growing the internet GDP. And even though we still operate autonomously at the moment, we are looking at creating those network effects with Stripe just to improve the experience of merchants, but also customers to pay and get paid online. Just to give a bit more context and like the scope, currently we have about 70,000 merchants across markets. And one of the core aspects of what we do is that we strongly believe in the power of startups and developers or solopreneurs to basically drive commerce across the continent. And we think that with the right tools, they can basically achieve whatever they want. So we're focusing on building this infrastructure to help developers, startups, but also any types of businesses just to operate more effectively and to scale the way that they can process and accept payments across the world. In terms of people, which is what we're going to talk about today, we're about 230 people at Paystack. We doubled our headcount last year, which is why the conversation is extremely relevant for us. Our headquarters are still in Lagos, but we're also a remote first company. So right now I'm sitting in a co-working space in Nairobi, and my colleagues are spread across about 13 to 15 locations in Europe, but also across the continent. That's about it. Oh,
Awesome.
second
Thanks.
question.
Exactly. I was just about to remind you. So what is it being a chief of staff? How did you get into that role? What does it mean?
Yeah. So just to give a bit of background information. So I was previously working in venture capital in Latin America. So very different background, but I was working with entrepreneurs since the beginning of my career. So first from an accelerator perspective, then from a VC perspective, which I really enjoyed because it gives you like a very broad spectrum of what is going on in the ecosystems, what are the dynamics in terms of unit economics of the different companies. But then I reached a point where I realized that I actually didn't know what it meant to work or scale a tech company. And I kind of felt like this imposter syndrome of telling companies what to do and how they should grow, but without knowing it myself. So this is when I decided to pivot and to transition into tech. Prior to Paystack, I was working for another payments company called Cellulant as part of their strategy team. When I joined Paystack about 8 months ago as a chief of staff, I think that my world opened like even more. I might have mentioned this before, but Paystack is an engineering and product first company. So everything that we do is very technical, but also very approachable for non-technical people like me. So I'm not an engineer. I don't have a computer science background at all. I studied economics and business. So it's always a learning curve. And I think that my role as the chief of staff, the way that I tend to summarize it is just to amplify the CEO's capacity and impact. So it's extremely entrepreneurial, but I have the safety net of working very close to the founder and to the CEO, but still to be part of a very big organization. And I would say that, no 2 days look the same. Ideally, I should be doing all the things to help Shola do more during his day. So if the day had 48 hours, like what are all the things that he should be doing? Most of my work is focused on product at the moment, and also business development. So talking a lot with our partners, which include mostly banks across the continent, and figuring out ways to accelerate our growth, which is our focus for this year.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Emmy. And as you were talking about that, disconnect between what you were doing and wanting to work with entrepreneurs, I'm reminded about my own background where I've worked to support entrepreneurs for most of my career. And before I finally took the jump to actually start my own company. And it's a completely different ball game when you are doing the theory and consulting of entrepreneurship and when you're in the thick of it. So I can relate with that. And as people listen in, I'm curious to hear any questions people have around joining a high growth company, managing talent in that company, recruitment, retention, and culture. So if you have any thoughts, questions, tips, insights, please drop them in the comments and I'll be reviewing those as well. And then Emmy, I'll take you back to something you said about how fast Paystack is growing. So you mentioned 70,000 plus merchants, 200 plus employees on the team. I'm expanding to new markets like Nairobi, potentially South Africa. And I'm curious to hear how you think about talent and hiring and recruitment as you expand, especially because one of the things people love about Paystack is the culture. And maybe we could even start by saying, how do you articulate the culture at Paystack to somebody who's curious? Because it gives up really good team vibes, a sprinkle of family with a lot of productivity. And it just seems like a very attractive place to work in. So what makes Paystack a place people are attracted to? And then how do you think about hiring and recruitment within Paystack?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we've grown a lot in size, like almost 2x. And at the same time, we switched to a completely remote company. So these were like very big challenges in the past year or year and a half. And it is definitely top of mind to ask ourselves, like, how do we continue this growth and how do we keep on hiring the best talent when we don't have as much direct contact with the different candidates that we might talk to. But the Paystack culture. So how to define it? I think that we have like a set of values, and for me, the value that resonates the most is practice kindness, because I think it kind of embodies everything that we do at Paystack, in the sense that we are primarily working with people we deeply care about, or I'll speak for myself. I primarily work with people that I deeply care about and just enjoy spending time with, but also like enjoy brainstorming with and just like solving problems together. So instead of seeing it exactly like a very transactional or like corporate relationship where there's like a lot of hierarchy and just like a lot of processes, it's more, okay, if you were to work with a friend that you respect on every aspect, like what would this relationship look like? And I think that in all the interactions that we have, like from the moment that we interact with potential candidates through the interview process, and then the way that we work on a daily basis, this is something that comes all the way. Does it mean that we only have good conversations? Of course not. There are also hard conversations that happen, like very tough ones, but it's always like keeping in mind the fact that we're all humans, we can all make mistakes, and we're all like learning from each other and trying to learn from a very complex ecosystem, which is the payment space in Africa. So yeah, that's how I would probably summarize it, even if there are many other things. The way that we also look at scaling, was that the question?
Especially scaling up the team, so hiring and scaling the team. Yes.
Exactly. I think there was something interesting that we were talking about earlier, you and I, of like how do you actually continue to hire at a good pace without necessarily having all the team or like the founding team being involved like at every aspect. And it's something that we also want to be very intentional about, so that the values across the company are very obvious and practiced, but also yeah, so that we can basically delegate some of the hiring decisions to the leads of the different functions, and then for the people within those teams to hire with the same flexibility. And I think that beyond the values, three things that are important for us is probably the transparency. So we share a lot the types of profiles that we're looking for, the types of candidates, just to make it very clear across the organizations, or what do these roles look like, and why are we hiring for. And I think something which is like a little tip is we always try to have a job description for like every role, except probably my own role that was a bit more blurry, just so that we know that we're looking for the same thing, and that when we come across talent, which can be in any kind of environment, then everyone on the team kind of feels empowered to refer someone or to start the conversation. The second thing is a little bit tied, which is also this flexibility, while trying to have like processes inside, if that makes sense. So how what does that look like? From an interview process, we try to have like a similar process of understanding the candidates, then asking like a very specific set of questions, just so that we can compare them like on a very fair basis, but also developing this skill to spot talent, even if it's not exactly for the role that you're hiring for. Because I think now, yeah, we have a clear roadmap of like some of the roles that are imminent and that we need to hire for, but we will keep on growing to more markets and adding more products to our product suite. So yeah, what we're trying to do is whenever we spot someone that we really click with and that we would really enjoy with, we try to understand a little bit more beyond their skills, like what does their career ideally look like for them, and how we can continue the conversation with them to make sure that whenever we're both ready, they can potentially be a match. So I think these are the most things that we try to do very intentionally when we think about hiring or acquiring new talent.
I love it. And when you were talking about the values, I know that that's one of the things that resonated with me and with us at Caret, and why we also partner with organizations like Paystack. So when you say practice kindness, for us, we think about extending grace, and very similar, baselines to how we approach things. A question I'm going to ask you next on this is, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face or you're seeing when you're trying to hire into Paystack as you're expanding and growing?
Yes, there are obviously, like with any human aspects, a lot of challenges. And I don't know if I should speak like only for Paystack or just in general what we're seeing in the ecosystem. But
You could start with Paystack and then expand to other
exactly,
things. Yeah.
exactly. So I think for us, one of the aspects is, especially as we are expanding and becoming a more diverse company, so outside of the very Nigeria-centric company that we used to be in the beginnings, is how do we create like a similar experience or employee experience across the different markets. And this comes from the moment that we start recruiting, how we determine like the salaries, how we determine like the skill kind of levels, all the way through the onboarding and then the career development. Because obviously, as we expand into more markets, not all the markets look the same. not only from a compensation perspective, but just in general of what does it mean to work in a specific country, especially when the offices are completely remote, and how do we make sure that the people who are new joiners feel connected to the team, even if they haven't met anyone from their team in person, and how do we convey this Paystack culture or just explain very well what we do to people we haven't really met. So I think that's one of the aspects that we think about a lot around how do we create like a fair benchmark, and how do we expand this kind of employee experience. The second thing is probably finding the right level of experience, and I think this also applies for post Series B, Series C companies where you need to hire people who become like more and more specialized in their specific field. So in the beginning, and that's another conversation we were part of together, you might have like more generalists role, or people who can just do a lot of things, roll up their sleeves, and kind of jump into the different problems that you need to solve. Then as the teams grow and need to be more structured, there's obviously more specialization that is needed. And unfortunately, and because we are still an early company, finding the right engineers with like the specific experience, for example, in automation or like in security, can become sometimes a little bit challenging. I think those would be the two. The last one is probably, as competition increases, obviously we are competing with more and more companies. And I think this is both a good and a challenging thing, in the sense that it's great that finally the world is also considering Africa as a great place to work and to work on really exciting things, and that talent from all over the world is coming. It's great that many companies are looking to hire African talent, even if they're not necessarily based on the company and the continent. It's also great to see more big tech companies coming to the continent and setting up teams here. But then this also means that we are competing with all those different companies in terms of talent, and that the pool of talent is still quite limited. So how do we differentiate ourselves, and how do we engage with the ecosystem on the longer term is something that we also think about a lot. And I'm curious to know, what are those challenges for you, for like an earlier stage company, but also like with those Pan-African aspirations?
Of course. I mean, all the things you said are super valid. And one thing we've also observed is how there's been a lot of focus on finding the right technical engineering developer UX UI skills. And there are a lot of companies, even like Utiva, who just finished the last Fireside chat, that work on that. Something that we're also seeing is a gap being created for non-tech talent as well, and at different levels and at different specializations. So it's something that we at Caret have taken on and said, we need to be able to get you the supply that you keep on talking about, such that they are at the right stage, aligned with the right kind of values, and can hit the ground running when they join your team. So that's something I'm hoping to even partner with more organizations like Paystack and other high growth tech startups to figure out how to make sure what Caret does satisfies the need and addresses the challenges that you're currently facing as well. And to just wrap this up, I have one. Oh, sorry, go for it.
No, I wanted to add also that something that we ask ourselves is whether then we can train and develop the candidates that we see, and have like different tracks within Paystack to kind of grow this talent pool that might not fully be ready for the roles that we have, or whether we are looking for like the right set of skill that is already ready to like kind of fly. And I think this is in general like a very interesting conversation. And how do you find the balance, and in which teams can you do those type of things, just to make sure that you can still move forward, you can still get some acceleration, but also have diverse pools of talent.
Yeah, and I know it goes without saying, because she had mentioned, do we find the right talent and we groom them in-house? And then there's the nice middle ground of partnering with companies who already do that and understand what you need, and having them just like funnel that talent to you as well. And to wrap this up, one question I have is, as you're scaling quickly, what tips do you have for other companies who are looking to bring in talent to their companies, that want to be mindful of their culture, but also want to grow? Are there any things Paystack has hacked as, the tips that people should bear in mind as they're scaling their own teams?
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge, especially for high growth companies, is that in an ideal world, you plan for all the hires that you need to make, and potentially you hire before you need the role to be filled, just so that there's a smooth transition and like the person can slowly ramp up. In the real world, the recruiting process usually starts when you're already swamped and like overwhelmed. And then the risk becomes to just lower the bar, and not to follow those company principles just in order to fill the role. And I think that the more companies are aware of this, or try to avoid it, the better. And then what we do internally is that even if we needed to hire like 2 days ago or 2 weeks ago, we try to involve as many people as possible, not in the hiring process to make things like process heavy, but just to have many different perspectives at the table. And then whenever we hire, we also look for like specific questions to answer so that we are comfortable with the move. And sometimes it might take more time to hire for a specific role, but we all want to be like very comfortable. One of those questions are, is it a strong yes? And this is a very good question to ask yourself, like just individually, when you walk out of an interview and it's like, how do I really feel about this person, rather than just like ticking the boxes. Another thing is, how would you feel if 10 people like this candidate would join Paystack tomorrow? And then this also helps to put things in perspective. And it's like, it's tied to the strong yes, but it's like, will this person actually contribute to the culture, to growing the culture, and to taking us to the type of company that we want to continue being or becoming? And then the last one is around like, does this person actually raises the bar? And the more we hire, the more we also need to make the decisions of the next person that I hire needs to be better at doing the job than I am. If not, there's no point. So the person needs to be, yes, better or have more experience, so that then the specializations becomes like a lot stronger, and the overall bar of the company raises. And this obviously takes time, but I think that taking the time to think about those elements and then having those very honest conversations and accepting to say no, regardless of the high hiring need, is quite important to maintain the standards.
Thank you, Emily. This has all been super insightful. And some things I'm taking away from this is, one, when you're hiring, especially when you're trying to scale your team, you need to think about transparency, and how you're putting out your needs to whoever you're hiring to. Two, when you're bringing people in, think about, are they a strong yes? If you had 10 of them on the team, would it grow your team? And are they raising the bar on the team as well? And those are some tips. I know it takes a lot of in the moment time, but it pays off in the longer term. So those are things that I'll definitely encourage any company looking to scale their talents to think of. And to close us out, I would say Paystack is hiring for a lot of roles right now. So if you're looking to join an amazing team, check out the Paystack website, paystack.com. And also Caret is hiring for a lot of roles. So if you're looking to join a new company working on the non-tech space, check out carethq.com.